Daniel Graves drove in silence, with Rex, his German shepherd who had served alongside him in Afghanistan, by his side. After his wife's death, he left the city, taking Rex to the Pine Barrens, a bleak, sparse forest where whispers of the Jersey Devil legend lingered. He sought solitude, but fate had other plans. When a road sign appeared, his truck suddenly stalled in the middle of the woods. Daniel stepped out to check, the cold wind carrying the scent of pine resin and damp earth into his lungs. Rex suddenly growled and bolted into the darkness. Daniel chased after him, his flashlight sweeping over dripping tree trunks until it glinted off metal. Before him was an overturned military truck, moss-covered, its rear wheels sunk in mud. The cargo door was ajar, revealing steel crates labeled in red, "Or Sard, do not open." As Daniel stepped back, Rex dug near a pine tree, uncovering a metal hatch engraved with U.S. Department of Defense. Daniel approached, crouched, his hand trembling slightly as it touched the ice-cold metal. He gripped the handle and pulled with all his strength. A piercing screech of hinges echoed through the forest as the hatch flew open. A blast of cold air hit his face, carrying the smell of rust and chemicals, a familiar stench from the military bunkers he'd seen in Afghanistan. He tightened his flashlight strap, checked the clip on his sidearm, and descended. The spiral iron staircase creaked with each step, every footfall sinking into the oppressive dampness. Rex followed closely, his shadow stretching long on the steel walls. At the bottom of the final 10 steps, Daniel paused. A narrow metal corridor stretched out, its walls stained and patchy, with faded warning signs. PO containment area, authorized personnel only. Ahead, a crooked sign on the wall, its text faded but legible, Project Chimera, Level 1. His heart pounded. He'd never heard of this project, but the name stirred a deep unease. His flashlight swept over a row of frosted glass doors, marked in military style, a 1, a 2, a 3. The place looked abandoned in haste, severed cables, toppled chairs, open file cabinets, dust coating decades. Daniel pushed open the largest room's door. On a control desk, a shattered CRT monitor sat beside rusted buttons. In a corner, an old tape recorder lay tilted, its reel not fully wound. He pressed play, a hiss crackled, then a man's low, halting voice. Day, August 12th. Test 47, unexpected reaction. Containment needed. The sound cut off. Daniel removed the tape, slipping it into his jacket pocket. He scanned the room, light reflected off glass tanks taller than a man. He stepped closer. In the murky fluid, something motionless floated, a vague shape, part human, part beast, protruding ribs, unnaturally long arms, a distorted head with a wolf-like snout. Another tank held a smaller form, infant-like, but with fur-covered skin and oversized eyes. Daniel stepped back, forcing his breath to stay silent. Rex growled softly, hackles raised, eyes locked on the tanks, as if sensing something alive within. On the wall, a whiteboard bore faint marker traces. Phase 3. Integration of canine genomes successful. Behavioral instability, 87%. Below it, a DNA helix symbol was slashed with red. Daniel snapped quick photos with his phone, the flash flaring in the dim space. In a corner, an unlocked steel file cabinet held dozens of plastic bags with photos, charts, and lab notebooks. He grabbed a few, wrapping them in a tarp. A stray VHS tape lay on the floor, labeled Test 47 Footage, Confidential. He took it all, stuffing them into his backpack. As he turned to leave, Rex barked softly toward the corridor. The flashlight flickered, its beam weakening. Daniel looked around, no wind, but a thin swirl of dust spun in the air as if static had just passed through. He switched on his helmet's emergency light. Its red glow traced the steel walls, revealing scratched words. Don't wake them. Suddenly, the corridor trembled faintly. A low hum rising from below, Rex backed up, barking twice sharply. Daniel slung on his backpack and hurried toward the stairs. As he reached the first step, a blinding white light flooded the corridor. Old round bulbs on the ceiling flickered on in sequence like a chain reaction. A control room screen blinked. System reboot. Access reactivated. Daniel froze, scanning around. The facility seemed to awaken from a long slumber. He pulled Rex close, gripping his flashlight, eyes fixed on the glowing Project Chimera. Sign under the reviving fluorescent lights. Daniel sealed the hatch, struggling to stay calm as the noises from below faded. The forest was unnaturally silent. Only his rapid breaths and the patter of rain on leaves audible. He led Rex back to the truck, put him in the back seat, and sped out of the Pine Barrens as the clock neared midnight. The winding dirt road felt endless, headlights cutting through thick fog. At every turn, Daniel sensed something watching. Not wildlife, but a human gaze. Back at his cabin, he lit a fire, hung his raincoat by the hearth, and opened his backpack. Everything from the bunker, files, VHS tape, recorder, was soaked but intact. He spread them on the table, arranging them methodically. The file cover bore raised text, Project Chimera. Phase, the 3rd U.S. Defense Research Division. Below was a blurred red stamp, classified, eyes only. Daniel removed his gloves, flipping through pages. Black and white photos showed specimens at various stages: primates, German shepherds, jaguars, and humans. Beside them were gene charts with double helix symbols, scribbled notes in ink. Hybridization tolerance, 14%. Behavioral control, unstable. The next page listed subjects. Phase 3 K9 unit, 7 codes, each with a status terminated or unknown. The final line chilled him. K907, status transferred operational. He glanced at Rex, curled by the fire, his wet fur gleaming gold. The dog's old steel collar bore a small engraving, K907. Daniel's hand tightened on the paper, his breath catching. What he read seemed impossible, but the photos, signatures, and military seals were undeniably real. He played the recorder. A hoarse, trembling male voice. Report April 16, 1974. Subject K907. Shows absolute loyalty, stable biological response. K9 human gene experiment deemed first success. Recommend transfer to training unit. Paper rustled, then a colder voice cut in. Disband research team. Project terminated by DoD order. Destroy all data. Remove subject from facility tonight. The sound ended with a small pop, like a short circuit. Daniel stopped the tape, closing his eyes briefly. He recalled meeting Rex Kandahar Base, 2010, a specially bred dog for recon, the trainer had said. He'd thought it was just an elite K9, now the pieces fit together. He opened the VHS case, sliding it into an old player in the corner. The screen flickered, then showed grainy footage, a brightly lit lab, people in hazmat suits around an operating table. A German shepherd lay still, its heart monitor steady. A scientist, likely Dr. Reeve, faced the camera, saying curtly, Phase 3. K9 human neural integration, commencing now. The image dissolved into static. Daniel switched it off, sweat beading on his neck. Outside, wind howled, the tin roof rattling. Rex suddenly lifted his head, growling softly. Daniel killed the lights, moving to the window. Faint moonlight lit the wet yard. In the fog, he saw a thin glint, like infrared binoculars. A quick movement at the forest's edge. Someone was there, watching. He stepped back, quietly locking the door. A faint engine hum sounded in the distance, then stopped. No headlights, just a soft metallic clink, like a car door closing. Daniel grabbed his flashlight, circling to the back door, peering through a curtain slit. Rex stood rigid beside him. On the dirt path to the cabin, fresh tire tracks cut deep into the mud, leading toward the highway. He crouched, placing a hand on Rex's head. We're not alone, the dog tilted its head, eyes seeming to understand. Daniel packed all the evidence, files, VHS, recorder, into a waterproof bag. He knew the drill: when dangerous evidence surfaces, move fast, leave no trace. Before leaving, he glanced at the TV, still showing the VHS's final frame. The faint Chimera logo, with text below. Phase 4. Pending approval. The project was never truly dead. An engine roared again, closer now. A red laser dot swept across the window. Daniel doused all lights, holding his breath. Seconds ticked by, only his heartbeat audible. Outside, someone stepped from a vehicle, splashing a puddle. The dark figure paused at the door, silent for a moment, then retreated. Tires rolled slowly through mud, fading into the night. Daniel checked his phone. No signal. He rebooted it. No service. The network was jammed. He looked at Rex, voice low. "They're tracking us." Rex gave a short bark, as if agreeing. Daniel pulled on his coat, tucked a handgun at his waist, and stuffed the hard drive into his backpack. Rain began falling again. He extinguished the fire, opened the back door, and slipped into the night, with all the evidence of Project Chimera. Awakened after nearly half a century buried, a gray dawn cloaked the wet forest as Daniel drove away from the dirt road leading to his cabin. The previous night's rain had stopped, but the ground was still thick with mud, tires leaving deep ruts. Rex sat alert in the back seat, eyes scanning out the window, body taut. Daniel checked the rearview mirror. The road behind was empty, but a soldier's instinct from surviving war zones told him something was wrong. At the cabin, he brought Rex inside, locked the door, and drew the curtains. Before anything else, he knelt to check the truck's undercarriage. Near the rear axle, a small metal object glinted. He pried it loose with a knife, a military-grade titanium GPS tracker with a blinking red light. A chill ran down his spine. This wasn't civilian tech, only intelligence or military units had access. He grabbed pliers, crushed the circuit, and tossed it into the cooling fireplace, watching it burn to ash. As Rex patrolled the house's corners, Daniel opened his laptop, trying to connect. No signal. He checked his phone, one weak bar, then nothing. The signal was jammed in a tight radius, precise as a mobile disruptor. He opened a cabinet, took his Glock 19, and chambered a round. Years in the military taught him, if the enemy knows your location, it's only a matter of time before they show up. Near noon, a low engine hum approached. Daniel stepped onto the porch, pretending to fix a hinge. A glossy black SUV, with government plates, stopped at the wooden gate. Two men in black suits stepped out, their dress shoes muddied, their strides confident and cold. One held a clipboard, the other wore sunglasses. "Mr. Graves?" the clipboard man asked. Voice even. Daniel nodded. "We're from the Environmental Protection Agency, investigating a chemical spill from an old military vehicle. Did you see or hear anything unusual in the area last night?" Daniel kept his face neutral, shaking his head. "Just moved here. Didn't see anything. Big rain last night. Power flickered. Something wrong?" The sunglasses man scanned the yard, pausing on fresh tire tracks. "Routine check, sir. If you spot anything suspicious, call this number." He handed over a card. No name, just a Washington, D.C. switchboard. Daniel took it, nodding slightly. They turned to leave, but the sunglasses man glanced at the window where Rex watched, growling softly. His gaze lingered a few seconds before he walked away. The SUV rolled off slowly down the path, leaving a faint diesel smell in the cold air. Daniel stood still, watching, his fingers tapping the concealed gun in his pocket. When the SUV vanished behind the pines, he returned inside. Rex still stared out the window, hackles up. Daniel patted his head. "I know," he said softly. He circled the house through the back door, scanning the area. Under the wooden porch steps, he found a fresh boot print, special issue military tread, not commercial. He photographed it. Nearby was a fresh cigarette butt, a brand used by federal security. He went back in, packing the files, VHS and recorder into his backpack. Pulling out a map, He marked the Pine Barrens, circling a 20-mile radius. If this was a covert cleanup, anyone in this zone could be watched. He grabbed extra fuel canisters, a multi-tool, and dried food packs, stowing them in the truck's trunk. As the sun dipped behind the pines, Daniel killed the lights, watching through the curtains in darkness. Another vehicle passed without stopping, its headlights briefly flooding his house before fading. No plates. Unease surged. He signaled Rex to stay quiet. The dog whined softly, awaiting orders. Night fell. Daniel locked the door, checked his weapons, and tucked the map into his jacket. He opened the back door, loaded Rex into the truck. "We're finding answers," he whispered. Headlights off, the truck rolled quietly from the dirt road, melting into the night. Behind them, in the silent pine forest, a tiny red infrared camera light blinked once and vanished, as if someone still tracked their every move. A small town emerged at the forest road's end, a row of weathered houses quiet in the gloomy morning. Daniel parked at the only open coffee shop, its rusted sign swaying, coffee and news creaking in the wind. He left Rex in the truck, pulled up his hood, and entered. Inside, a few locals sat under yellow lights. The wooden table scratched, the air thick with coffee and cigarette smoke. In a corner, a woman about 35 sat by an old laptop, surrounded by stacks of files. He recognized her from an online article, Grace Miller, a freelance reporter who'd written The Missing of Barrens. Daniel approached, stopping a few steps from her table. "Grace Miller?" he asked quietly. She looked up, sharp, brown eyes scanning the stranger's weathered face. "Who are you?" "Someone who's seen what you're chasing," he replied, placing a waterproof envelope on the table. Grace hesitated, then opened it. Inside were 3 photos, a moss-covered military truck, a metal corridor with a project chimera, level 1 sign, and a close-up of glass tanks holding deformed creatures. She stared, her face shifting from skepticism to tension. "Where'd you take these?" Her question was quick, dry. Daniel answered curtly. "Pine Barrens, less than 12 hours ago." She leaned back, tapping her files. "I've tracked disappearances here for 3 years. Reservists, forestry workers, 2 construction engineers, all vanished near that area. The government says it's hazardous terrain, but," she pointed at the Chimera logo, "if this is real, it's no accident." Daniel pulled the thick file from his backpack, setting it on the table. "Found these with a recorder and VHS. Stoneowls read 'em more, can't be he's and read them." Grace flipped through gene charts, experiment logs. She stopped at the title page. Bold text, Project Chimera, she inhaled sharply, turning the page. "My God, I saw this logo in declassified records from 1999. A military bioproject shut down in 1974. No one knew why, just ethical risks and control failures. All files after that vanished." She looked at Daniel. "You went into the bunker? Is it still active?" "Abandoned, but the power kicked on when I left. I don't think it's fully dead." Grace paused, then opened her laptop, pulling up a blurry photo from a 1970s meeting. 5 men in uniforms, a Chimera Defense Program banner behind them. This project got $42 million to study enhanced soldier reflexes, but a redacted section mentioned genome splicing with non-human subjects. Daniel leaned back, gripping his cold coffee. They did something to Rex. His collars, marked a K907, matches a code in the files. Grace's eyes flickered. K907, they experimented on service dogs. I saw that code in a lost record. Subject transferred to active military use. She shut her laptop, looking at him gravely. "If your dog's part of Chimera, you're lucky to be alive." Outside, Rex sat in the truck, watching the road. A black SUV crept by slowly, plates unclear. They both tracked it. Grace whispered, "They know." Daniel nodded, eyes on the door. "2 government guys visited my place this morning, asked about the truck." She raised an eyebrow. "What'd you say?" "Said I didn't know." Grace frowned. "They'll be back. If it's Chimera, they don't leave witnesses." She packed her files, shut her laptop, and zipped her jacket. We need clearer proof. Photos, video, undeniable evidence. Daniel understood, pulling a USB with the bunker's audio and video from his backpack. Not enough. They could call it fake. Grace nodded. Then we go back. Record the whole facility, mark locations, secure evidence. If anything's active, it'll expose itself. Daniel glanced outside. The sky was turning gray, wind carrying the forest's damp scent. He considered, then said softly, "I know the way in, but this time we can't make mistakes." Grace replied, "I'm not afraid of danger. I'm afraid of the truth, staying buried another 50 years. They stood almost simultaneously. Daniel paid for the coffee, pulling his hood down. Before leaving, Grace left a note with an emergency contact, her handwriting quick but firm. "If I don't check in within 24 hours, send all this to the New York Chronicle. I have someone I trust." Daniel nodded. Outside, the wind grew stronger, a distant car horn echoing from the highway. Rex perked up at his owner, tail wagging, lightly, but eyes scanning vigilantly. Daniel opened the truck door, let Grace take the passenger seat, and started the engine. The black SUV was gone, but its tire tracks remained clear on the wet road. He turned away from the town, heading back to the Pine Barrens. Ahead, the pine forest stretched endlessly, and somewhere underground, Project Chimera waited for their return. Late afternoon, thick clouds blanketed the Pine Barrens, bringing heavy dampness and the sharp scent of pine resin. Daniel drove deep into the forest, headlights casting broken beams through the fog. Grace sat beside him, laptop open to recording software, while Rex sat in the back, head high, ears perked, body alert. When they reached the old M35 truck site, only a charred frame remained, its body dragged off, fresh tire tracks pressed into the mud. Clear evidence. Someone had been here before them. Daniel killed the engine, signaling silence. They waded through wet leaves, following a narrow path to the pine tree where the hatch lay half buried. He cleared fresh mud, yanking the handle. The hatch popped open, cold air rushing up with the smell of old metal. Grace shone her flashlight down the spiral steel stairs, its beam catching the faded wall text. Project Chimera, Level 1. The three descended. The air below was thick, more stifling than before. Corridor lights glowed faintly, as if the system hadn't fully shut off. Daniel opened his backpack, pulling out a backup battery and power adapter Grace had prepped. "If I'm right, the main power's in the central control room," he said. Grace connected cables, plugged into an auxiliary panel, and flipped the breaker. A dry click sounded. Then corridor ceiling lights flickered on one by one. The stained metal walls gleamed under pale white light, revealing sealed lab rooms on either side. Daniel led Grace to the largest room, where he'd found the files. Everything was as he'd left it: control desk, recorder, and rifled file cabinet. But their target was an old projector on a corner table, its VHS slot intact. Grace plugged it in, connected the battery, and inserted the Test 47 footage tape. The CRT screen glowed faint green, then slowly displayed grainy black and white images. In the footage, another laboratory appeared, clean, fully equipped, with at least 5 people in hazmat suits. On the operating table lay a German Shepherd, its body wired with electrodes. A middle-aged man stood before the camera, his voice steady and low. "Report, August 12, 1974. Project Chimera, Phase 3. Test Subject K97. He looked up, his face clear in the light. Dr. Isaac Reeve. Grace leaned toward the screen, whispering, "My God, it's really him." On the film, Reeve continued. Objective: integrate human neural genes into the canine nervous system to enhance reaction, cognition, and emotional bonding. The camera angle shifted, the dog jerked sharply, eyes opening, pupils reflecting white light. A technician said something inaudible, and Reeve responded, "Alpha waves stable. K97 is receiving signals. Record behavior." A rustling sound, then a close-up cut back. The dog stood, eyes locked on Reeve, tail wagging slightly, responding like a human taking orders. The screen flickered for a few seconds before cutting to a new scene. An empty room, an open iron cage, a sign reading specimen transferred. At the tape's end, Reeves' voice returned, low and urgent. Lower levels remain unstable, many specimens not destroyed. Keep level 2 sealed. No one permitted below. The image faded, then cut off. Grace sat silent for a moment, then whispered, "If the lower levels are still active, Chimera never stopped." Daniel didn't respond. He leaned over the old control panel, where a power light had just blinked on. A red message appeared on the dim screen. System reconnect. Signal link established. He frowned, pulling the monitor closer. A small window in the corner showed them, Daniel, Grace, Rex, standing in the lab, filmed from a ceiling angle. The internal camera system had activated and was transmitting outward. Grace quickly closed her laptop, unplugging the projector. "Someone's watching us." Daniel glanced at Rex. The dog had positioned himself at the door, growling low. He drew his Glock, checked the magazine, and signaled Grace to shut off all devices. The corridor lights outside flicked off, leaving only the faint glow of their flashlights. In the silence, they heard a muffled sound from deep in the ventilation system, a steady click, like an electronic pulse, mixed with a distant hum. "Could be the system auto-reactivating," Grace said softly, trying to reassure herself. But Daniel shook his head. "No, that's a transmission signal. They've got our visuals." He stepped back, gathering all the files and tapes, stuffing them into his backpack. Before leaving the room, the red ceiling camera light flashed again, then turned blue, data transmission active. Daniel looked up, his gaze cold. "We're leaving now." They rushed back up the stairs, flashlight beams shaking with each step. As they neared the hatch, a cold gust swept down, carrying a distant rumble like an engine starting underground. Daniel pushed Grace ahead, Rex following. He glanced back one last time. The corridor below blazed with light again, bulbs flickering on like a reviving circuit. The control room screen they just left flashed repeatedly, "Link successful, remote connection active." Daniel slammed the hatch shut. The clang of metal echoed through the pine forest, mingling with the howling wind. He knew that in minutes, this place would no longer be their secret. Project Chimera had awakened itself. In orbit, over 400 miles above Earth, the military reconnaissance satellite, Hawkeye IV, detected an unusual signal from the heart of the Pine Barrens, New Jersey. The data packet carried an old DoD identifier, linking to a server dormant since 1974, Project Chimera. Within 3 minutes, the signal was relayed to the National Security Agency headquarters in Arlington. On a monitoring screen, a stark message appeared, "Reactivation detected, priority red." In a secluded office behind the base, Colonel Nathan Reeve received an encrypted call. The man in his 40s, with close-cropped hair and a stern face, had sharp eyes behind clear glasses. Hearing Chimera, he paused briefly before saying, "I thought that site was fully sealed." The voice on the line replied curtly, "Not anymore. We need you to clean it up thoroughly. No records left." Reeve hung up, standing. On his desk was an old photo, his father, Dr. Isaac Reeve, in a lab, the Chimera logo behind him. He stared at it a moment, then folded it, slipping it into his jacket. "This time, I'll end your legacy, Dad," he muttered, turning to his subordinate. "Prep Team Raven. We move in 10. That afternoon, 4 unmarked helicopters lifted off from a civilian base in Delaware, flying low over the forest. Each carried 6 men, mercenaries with experience in covert Middle East operations. They were equipped with standard weapons, jammers, thermal scanners, and portable data shredders. Reeves sat in the lead chopper, reviewing a reactivation report. Visual confirmation, 2 civilians, 1 K9 unit. Satellite imagery clearly showed Daniel, Grace, and Rex exiting the bunker. He issued a brief order. Priority is evidence recovery, then erase all traces, no survivors. Meanwhile, Daniel and Grace had set up a temporary camp on the northern edge of the Pine Barrens, about 3 miles from the bunker. They pitched a tent near a dry stream bed, trying to catch a radio signal to gauge external reactions, but all frequencies were jammed with white noise. Daniel removed his headset, frowning. It's not equipment failure. Someone's using military-grade blockers. Grace looked up, wind a-whistling her hair. They know. Daniel nodded, voice low, and they're coming. Rex suddenly perked his ears, staring skyward. A low, droning sound, helicopter rotors grew louder. Daniel doused the fire, pulling Grace down. The treetops above shook, searchlight beams sweeping through. White light sliced the darkness, crisscrossing the forest like cold blades. They're scanning for heat, Daniel said, guiding her into a rock hollow. Rex crouched low, panting. 2 helicopters circled, dropping 4 teams of soldiers. Parachutes snapped open, steel cables cutting the air. In the dark, weapons glinted. The men hit the ground, moving in formation. Reeves spoke through his radio. Targets are north. Bunkers in the south sector. Alpha team, lock it down. Bravo, sweep the perimeter. I want all recording devices recovered before dawn. Daniel peered through infrared binoculars, spotting 4 heat signatures moving their way. About 10 men, heading straight for us, he whispered. Grace clutched her camera, breathing softly. If they reach the bunker, all evidence is gone. Daniel shook his head. We can't go back. Right now, we just survive. He coiled a rope, securing his backpack, signaling to move. They followed the stream bed, moving against the wind to avoid thermal detection. Insect sounds vanished. The forest held its breath. A white beam swept 100 meters away, hitting a tree, then swinging right. Daniel pressed Grace to the ground, covering them with a camouflage poncho. Rex lay still, eyes fixed on the light. Above, Reeves scanned through night vision goggles. He noticed a small, steady heat signature, too uniform for wildlife. Got them, he said coldly. Coordinates 42°9, moving north. In circle, Alpha team split into 2 groups, closing in. Daniel sensed pressure from multiple directions. He whispered, "They're boxing us in." Grace nodded, clutching the data drive in her pocket. Rex growled softly. The wind had shifted, carrying the smell of machine oil. Helicopters dropping lower, Daniel said, pulling her onto a narrow trail up a hillside. Behind them, soldiers' radios crackled faintly. Hold position, don't lose the signal. They scrambled over fallen trees, slipping on wet earth, sweat mixing with dirt. Halfway up the slope, Daniel stopped, looking down. Among the trees, he saw blinking red lights, jammers placed around the bunker, blocking all radio signals. Reeves stood among his men, directing a technician, lock the entire area. No signals get out. The sky flashed again, helicopter rotors thumping. Daniel pulled Grace behind a large boulder, voice hoarse. We're officially being hunted. Rex growled low, eyes on the deep forest, where a sharp metallic click sounded, like a weapon being cocked. The chase had begun. They ran along the ridge until the helicopter sounds faded south. Rain began falling, heavy drops pounding the leaves. Daniel stopped by a large oak, panting, signaling Grace and Rex to halt. They'll sweep again from the air, he said quietly. Grace nodded, covering her camera and data bag with her jacket. They hid under the canopy, listening. Wind hissed through the forest, leaves scraping together, but the engine noise was gone. When their breathing steadied, Daniel pointed west. There's an old power station at the forest edge. We need to reach it before dawn. They moved silently along a muddy trail. After nearly an hour, a covered headlight flickered ahead, not a vehicle, but a faint fire glow from a dilapidated wooden shack. Daniel signaled Grace to stop, drawing his gun. Rex growled softly, but Daniel raised a calming hand. He crept forward, flashlight low. 10 meters from the door, a hoarse voice called out, "Don't take another step, Graves. I know who you are." Daniel froze. A figure emerged from the shack, thin, long white hair, silver beard, wearing an old military coat. He held a shotgun, lowered, not aimed. "Name's Harris Cole," he continued. "And if you want to live, lower your weapon." The name clicked. Daniel recalled a line from the files he'd read the previous night. Cole, Harris L. Security Division. Chimera Facility, 1972. 74. He lowered his gun, stepping forward. You worked there. Not just worked, Harris replied, eyes narrowing. I held the keys for Colonel Reeves' father. I know how that monster was made. Inside the shack, a dim oil lamp lit cracked wooden walls. On a table lay papers, maps, and old equipment. Harris poured them coffee, cutting to the point. I've watched that site for 30 years. They thought it was buried forever. But when the bunker's lights came back on, I knew something woke up. Grace opened her laptop, showing photos she and Daniel had taken in the bunker. Harris nodded slightly. That's level 1. But there are 7 more levels below. The deepest, level 8, is where they kept the original specimens. He pulled a large rolled blueprint from a drawer, spreading it on the table, a technical map of the facility, printed in faded blue ink. They built it like an inverted pyramid, each level smaller, centered around a bioreactor. I was entrusted with the access codes. Daniel pointed to a biocontainment. Level 4, mark on the schematic. This level, is that where we saw the creatures in the tanks? Harris nodded. Yes. Level 4 held live test subjects. When the shutdown order came, they only sealed it, didn't destroy anything. They didn't want to lose the data. Another team moved active specimens deeper. Grace looked up. So the hybrids are still alive. Harris met her gaze. I believe so, and some may never have been sealed. The air in the shack grew heavy. Daniel leaned on the table, voice firm. We need stronger evidence. Which level is active? Where's the data stored? Harris opened a small metal box, revealing a silver keycard and a slip of paper with a long code. This opens levels -4 and -5. If the system hasn't changed, it'll work. Level -5 has a backup server room storing all data before it's sent to the main network. Get that drive, and you'll have everything: specimen lists, reports, and the names of the funders. Daniel took the card, tucking it carefully into his jacket. Grace asked, why keep this all these years? Harris gave a dry laugh. Guilt. I guarded the doors when they brought kidnapped kids into the facility for DNA samples. They called it for science. After the 1974 explosion, I left, but those images never faded. A distant thunderclap shook the tin roof. Rex lifted his head, growling softly, staring out the window. Daniel approached, pulling the curtain. In the rain, white searchlights swept the forest. Reeves' team, he looked at Harris, they're here. Harris nodded, unsurprised. I know, I've set traps around they can't get in yet, but they won't give up. You and her need to leave before dawn. Grace closed her laptop, voice urgent. We can't leave empty-handed, we have to go below, get the evidence. Otherwise, it's just a story. Harris studied them for a long moment, then pulled an old M1911 pistol from a drawer. He checked the magazine and slid it to Daniel. If you're set, I'll lead the way. There's a secondary entrance northwest, an old ventilation shaft straight to level -2. From there, this card can get you deeper. Daniel nodded, eyes resolute. When we reach the server, we copy the data and destroy the facility. Harris gave a faint smile, weary yet relieved. Good, do what I never dared. Outside, rain pounded, wind lashing the windows. Daniel, Grace, and Rex prepped, flashlights, spare batteries, rope, ammo. As they left the shack, Harris glanced at the forest one last time, whispering, 30 years, Chimera. Now I'll bury you for good. They vanished into the forest shadows, leaving only the sound of thunder and fading helicopter rotors in the black sky. Their return to the Chimera bunker was set, not just to uncover, but to end it. A pale dawn broke as they approached the bunker for the 3rd time. Last night's rain left shimmering puddles under faint light. Harris led, his headlamp flashing rhythmically, reflecting off wet trees. He stopped at a large mound covered in vines, brushing aside weeds to reveal a heavy steel door etched with a triangle and vent shaft. West access. This is the old ventilation route, he said hoarsely. Sealed since '74, but the path's still there. If we're lucky, we'll come out on level -2. Daniel wedged a crowbar into the door's edge. With their combined strength, the steel creaked open. Cold air rushed out, thick with chemical fumes. They switched on flashlights and slid down a narrow ladder, gripping rusted handrails. Rex leapt down last, claws scraping the metal floor. They moved deeper, passing 2 turns, until Harris stopped at an alloy security door. He inserted the keycard and entered the long code from the faded paper. The red light blinked, then turned green. The door opened, revealing a wider corridor, a faint sign on the wall. Level 4. Biocontainment. As they stepped in, the temperature dropped sharply. The silence was broken only by their boots and breaths, echoing off the walls. Dim bulbs glowed along the corridor, a backup power system still running. The facility seemed to operate on its own. No humans needed. Metal pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping rhythmically. Room doors bore labels. Specimen storage. A. Biotest Zone B. Harris pointed to the end. Main storage is there. Careful, if the tanks still have pressure, the system's alive. The final door opened with a long hiss. Inside was a vast room, nearly 20 feet high, lined with giant glass tanks connected by tubes. Green light from within cast a cold glow over the space. Grace raised her camera, hands trembling. "My God," she whispered. Each tank held a different form, overdeveloped muscles, wrinkled skin, distorted heads and limbs. Some tanks bubbled, oxygen systems still active. Daniel approached a central tank. Inside, a creature with a human body, but a German shepherd's head floated. Its eyes were closed, mouth slightly open, a breathing tube embedded in its neck. Steady bubbles made a low hum, almost like breathing. "They're not dead," he said softly. Harris stood behind, his face pale in the flashlight's glow. They never were. They used hybrid cells with tissue regeneration. "I warned them," Rex suddenly snarled, fur bristling, eyes fixed on a tank in the corner. A faint tapping sounded, thud, 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 like something trying to break the glass. Grace flinched, stepping back. Daniel raised his gun, moving forward. In the tank, the pale green fluid began to swirl. A distorted hand with black claws slammed the glass, leaving a small web-like crack. Rex barked fiercely, the sound echoing. "Fall back," Harris said urgently. "The sensors will trigger if pressure shifts." Daniel signaled Grace to retreat, but she kept filming, panning across the tanks. The green light reflected on her screen, capturing data labels on the tanks. Specimen K9 Hybrid Series, Subject 47 Viability, 94%. A faint note below, "Do not drain." Alive. Daniel backed toward the door, eyes on the creature. The crack spread, fluid leaking. He snapped quick photos, then pulled Grace out. "Enough, let's go." Harris waited in the corridor, holding a small radiation meter. Its needle twitched. Backup powers surging. Something's coming online. The group hurried back through the corridor. At a turn, the ceiling lights flickered, emitting a soft hum. Harris pointed to a metal cabinet on the wall. "There's a tissue sample storage in there. We need one for DNA proof." Daniel unlatched it, pulling out a box with vials labeled K907, neural tissue. He looked at Harris, stunned. It was Rex's code. "This is enough to make it undeniable," Grace said, voice shaking. A low alarm blared through the corridor. "Warning. Containment pressure unstable." Red lights flashed overhead, pulsing urgently. From the room behind, a crash of water and breaking metal echoed. Daniel spun around. The green light from the door warped, then went dark. "We leave now," Harris shouted. They raced up the stairs to level -3. Rex ran ahead, barking continuously. As they passed the door, a small explosion sounded below, steam billowing white. The backup lights died, leaving only their wavering flashlights. They paused at a landing, panting. Grace checked her camera. The footage clearly showed the tanks and creatures, irrefutable proof. Daniel wrapped the tissue sample box in a waterproof bag. Harris stared below, face tense. Level 4 just rebooted. The system's adjusting pressure. If we don't shut it down from the control center, that whole level will blow. Daniel nodded, his gaze resolute. Then we head to the control center, level -5. He gripped his gun tightly, looking at Rex. The dog growled softly, eyes fixed on the dark corridor ahead, where a cold draft rose from below, carrying the heavy scent of metal and the faint sound of something stirring in the shadows. The sound of splintering metal from the lower level hadn't faded when a faint engine hum echoed from a distance, low, steady, and clearly not from an automated system. Daniel paused mid-step on the stairs, tilting his head to listen. Soft clicks sounded like boots on steel flooring. Harris glanced at him, eyes warning, "They're here." A white beam swept through the corridor, casting their shadows on the wall. A radio crackled through static. Level -3. Heat signatures detected. Commence sweep. Daniel pulled Grace behind a steel pillar, Rex crouching silently. Across the way, two figures in tactical masks approached, their weapon-mounted flashlights scanning. One activated a scanner. Its screen showed two red dots moving. "They're east." The first shot rang out. Daniel shoved Grace behind a ventilation duct, firing 3 rounds, bullets sparking off the steel walls. Harris returned fire with his M1911, dropping one soldier at the door but taking a grazing shot to the shoulder. He staggered, struggling to stay upright. "Go," he shouted, blood seeping through his jacket. Daniel pulled Grace through a narrow corridor. Rex closed behind. Ricocheting bullets echoed in the confined space, mixing with the alarm's wail from below. Gunpowder smoke spread, its acrid smell blending with metallic air. Daniel kicked open a door to a technical area, dense with control panels and pipes lining the ceiling. Lights flickered, a few old monitors glowing faintly. He barred the door, propping Harris against the wall. "They've got minutes before they reach us," Daniel said, clutching his Glock. Harris, wincing, used his knife to cut a strip from his shirt to bind his wound. Grace opened her bag, pulling out a specialized USB. "The main server's on level -5, but this level has a backup that can copy data first." She rushed to a control panel, typing on a dusty keyboard. The screen lit up, displaying System Link active. Daniel heard metal clanging outside. Reeves' men were trying to breach the lock. "Hurry," he urged. Grace connected the device, downloading every visible folder, personnel files, 1970, 1974, specimen data, funding records. Each file flashed a red top secret label. She selected all, hitting copy. The progress bar crawled. Harris pushed himself up, gun trembling. "They won't let up. They know we're here because of the locked door." An explosion rocked the room. The metal door blasted open with a small charge. Steel shards flew, dust billowing. Daniel pulled Harris down, returning fire. 3 soldiers stormed in, moving in a staggered formation. Rex lunged, tackling the lead man, dragging him down. Daniel shot the second in the shoulder, dropping him. The third took cover behind a panel, firing rapidly. A bullet struck Harris's arm, and he collapsed with a low groan. Grace shouted, "Backup's almost done." The progress bar hit 98%. Daniel leaned out, tossing a smoke grenade. White fog flooded the room. He dragged Harris and Rex near the console. As the smoke thickened, Grace yanked the USB, shoving it into her pocket. "Done." Harris grabbed Daniel's shoulder, voice hoarse. "There's an emergency exit through the cooling room, leads to level -5. You can reach the central control from there." He pointed to a side door. Daniel nodded, firing 2 covering shots and pulling Grace toward it. Rex followed, smoke cloaking their retreat. They slid through a narrow corridor, heat from the pipes radiating intensely. As the door closed behind them, gunfire faded. Daniel propped Harris against the wall. Blood poured from his shoulder wound, but his eyes stayed sharp. "I'm fine," he said, forcing himself upright. "I've got enough to reach the center, but you have to destroy what they haven't taken." Daniel glanced at Grace. She checked the USB. "We've got everything, experiment reports, signatories, budget files. This could blow the Pentagon apart. Daniel nodded, voice low. Only if we survive to get it out. In the distance, the ventilation system roared back to life, air hissing through ducts. Corridor lights flickered, turning red. The alarm blared steadily, low and heavy. Harris looked up, breathing softly. They've triggered the emergency protocol, self-destruct. Daniel gripped his gun, eyes on the corridor leading deeper. Then we move before it blows. Rex barked once, taking the lead. Grace secured her backpack, clutching the USB. They raced to the corridor's end, their shadows merging with the pulsing red lights of the technical level. Behind them, Reeves' team regrouped for another pursuit. On the abandoned control panel, a screen flashed. Data transfer complete. Unknown device connected. Another data stream automatically sent through the internal network, linking to the upper levels, as if the system itself was trying to preserve its secrets before destruction. They tore through the long cooling corridor, red lights flashing relentlessly. Leaking pipes spewed steam, casting their wavering shadows on metal walls. Daniel led, Harris trailed, and Grace stayed between, clutching the data drive. The alarm's wail pounded their ears. At a junction, Daniel signaled to stop. A ceiling camera swiveled, blinking green. Security systems had reactivated. Move, he whispered, veering right, pulling them toward the stairs to level -5. Halfway down, a small explosion sounded behind them. The shockwave shook the corridor, heat blasting their backs. Harris shouted, "They've breached the technical level door." Daniel fired 2 shots back, but smoke and flickering lights blurred his vision. "Go ahead," he yelled to Grace. She ducked, gripping the railing, racing down. Rex followed. At the level's landing, a metal door to the left burst open, 3 black-clad tactical soldiers charging out. Grace screamed. Daniel turned too late. One soldier's kick sent her camera flying, while the others pinned her to the floor. "Grace," Daniel shouted, lunging, but a hail of bullets forced him behind a wall. Harris yanked him back, yelling over the noise. "No, go back and we're both dead." Daniel clenched his jaw, watching them bind Grace's hands, gag her, and drag her the opposite way. Their footsteps echoed until they faded. Daniel gripped his gun, eyes burning. Harris placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "She's alive. They need a hostage for the data." Daniel nodded, silent. Rex whined, looking where Grace was taken. "We'll find her after. First, we stop the destruct sequence at the control center." Elsewhere in the bunker, Grace was shoved into a wide room. Harsh white light blinded her. As her vision cleared, she saw a man in a black uniform with 3 silver stars on his shoulders, tall and broad, Colonel Nathan Reeve. His face was stone-cold, gray-blue eyes piercing her. He removed his gloves, setting them on a steel table. "Grace Miller, I read your first Pine Barrens article 3 years ago. Thought you were just a sensation-chasing reporter. Now I see you're more stubborn than I expected." Grace didn't respond, staring back. Reeve tilted his head. "I don't have time for long interrogations. Tell me where Graves and Cole are, and most importantly, I need the drive you just took." He held up another USB, a copy they'd made upstairs. "He's good at copying, not at covering tracks." She smirked. "Then why are you still here cleaning up the mess?" Reeves' eyes narrowed, voice lowering. "You don't grasp how big this is. I'm not doing this for my superiors, but for my father." Isaac Reeve created Chimera, a project ahead of its time, but he died in disgrace because of those who funded him. They turned his legacy into a nightmare. "I'm just burying it for good." Grace met his gaze, voice icy. "By killing everyone who knows the truth?" Reeve paused, then said slowly. "If that's the price to end it, yes." Chimera didn't stop at Pine Barrens. It spread, Alaska, Nevada, even the Middle East. The government never destroyed it, just renamed it. The new project is Helix Frontier. Get it? Controlled evolution is still happening. A chill ran down Grace's spine. "Then why not expose it? You have the power, the evidence." Reeve gave a dry laugh. "Expose it? You think that ends it? A government collapses, Millions panic. The world learns humanity's no longer pure. No, I choose another way. Wipe it all out, including you. He turned to an officer nearby. Prep the destruct order. I want this facility ash. The soldier nodded, entering commands on a panel. The light shifted from yellow to red. A cold system voice announced, self-destruct protocol, engaged. Countdown, 15 minutes. Grace struggled, shouting, "You're killing your own men down there." Reeve turned, eyes emotionless. They knew what they signed up for. This is cleansing, Miss Miller. And you'll die here like everyone who touched my father's legacy. He nodded to the guards, signaling to take her out. As they dragged Grace away, she glanced back, eyes defiant. You can't hide it forever, Reeve. One day Chimera will devour you. Reeve didn't respond, staring through a glass window at the lower levels. Below, red lights flashed, biocontainment breach warning, blinking. In another corridor, Daniel and Harris ran, the alarm echoing. 15 minutes, Harris said, panting. He's activated self-destruct. Daniel gripped his gun, eyes darkening. And he's got Grace. Reeve spoke into his radio, voice sharp. Ensure Graves doesn't escape. If he reaches the control center first, detonate early. Outside the window, blinking lights reflected on his face, eyes burning with hate and resolve. Father, let Chimera live. I'll be the one to end it. Meanwhile, Grace was marched down a corridor to a holding cell. She glanced at the ceiling, cameras still recording, streaming live to a military network. An idea sparked if she could send a message before the explosion. But that needed time, and Daniel had to reach the control center before the bunker became an inferno. The alarm blared through the complex, red lights sweeping the steel walls. Daniel and Harris raced toward the control center. The countdown clock on screens read 9:47, 9:46. They had to find Grace before the self-destruct fully activated. Heat from auxiliary generators thickened the air. Rex ran alongside, growling low. At a junction, Harris stopped, leaning against the wall, blood seeping from his shoulder. He spoke urgently. Holding cells are east, level -5. Control centers right below. I remember it well. Daniel looked at him, voice hoarse. You can't keep going. Harris gave a tired smile. I've got enough to cover your back. Go save her. I'll hold the door. Before Daniel could protest, Harris pulled out his M1911, checking the magazine. If the corridor lights flash 3 times, I've blocked their pursuit. Daniel nodded, gripping his hand. Thank you, Harris said curtly. Finish it. Daniel and Rex veered east. Gunfire erupted behind. Harris had engaged Reeves' men. Explosions echoed, mixed with shouts. Daniel clenched his jaw, sprinting. The holding cell corridor was locked with a biometric system. He swiped Harris's keycard. The light turned green, and the door opened. Inside was dark, lit only by flashing red lights. At the end of the row, through frosted glass, he saw Grace, hands bound, mouth taped, 2 guards nearby. Daniel signaled Rex. The dog moved silently, gliding low, then leapt at the first guard. A short groan sounded as he collapsed. Daniel fired twice, dropping the second. He rushed over, ripping the tape off Grace's mouth. You're here, she gasped, eyes wet with fear and relief. Where's Reeve? Daniel asked, cutting her bonds. In the control center, she replied. He's started the countdown. He nodded, pulling her up. We have to stop it. A nearby wall screen showed the countdown at 7:15. Gunfire from afar stopped abruptly. Harris was keeping his promise, but Daniel knew it wouldn't last. He led Grace and Rex down the main corridor. As they turned a side path, a small explosion shook the walls. The door behind was blasted open. Fire poured in, black smoke curling upward. Daniel steadied Grace, ducking behind a fireproof wall, taking a deep breath before pushing on. At the corridor's end was a large door etched with central control, authorized personnel only. The panel beside it flashed lockdown active. Daniel pried off the steel cover, short-circuiting the wires with his knife. Sparks flew, and the system disengaged. The door opened slowly, creaking loudly. Inside, the control room was vast, lined with CRT monitors, lights blinking densely. A central panel displayed self-destruct sequence, engaged. Below was an access code panel. Daniel approached, typing rapidly. He couldn't cancel the sequence but could pause it. Level 1 clearance required, the screen read. He recalled the keycard, each stored a technician's ID. He inserted it, entering Harris's code. The screen flashed, access granted. He typed suspend countdown. The clock froze at 5:58. A robotic voice announced, sequence paused, manual override required to resume. Grace exhaled, collapsing into a chair. You did it. Daniel scanned the room. Not quite. They'll notice soon. He took the USB from Grace, plugging it into a data port. Download everything from the main server. We need a backup. Grace typed quickly. Folders appeared. Chimera the Sec, Helix Frontier, Sub-Level Gene Archive. Data streamed to the drive. Suddenly, the system blared, unauthorized access detected. Security protocol re-engaged. The room's lights turned red, the alarm screaming again. The countdown resumed, ticking to 4:59, 4:58. Daniel slammed the console. They've got a backup code. On a corner screen, cameras showed Reeve entering the control area via a west corridor, gun in hand, flanked by 2 Special Forces soldiers. Daniel glanced at Grace. Stay here, keep downloading. I'll hold the door. He pulled Rex to a defensive position at the entrance, aiming his gun. The door exploded open, Reeve stepping in, firelight glinting off his face. Stop, Graves, he shouted. You don't know what you're doing. Daniel replied coldly. I know exactly, ending what your father started. Reeve fired first, the bullet grazing a steel wall. Daniel returned fire, forcing them behind a panel. Amid the gunfire, Grace kept typing. The download at 78%, Reeve yelled through the smoke. Think you're saving anyone? This place is coming down. Daniel gritted his teeth. If I go down, your secret dies with me. Another explosion sounded. Harris, from the rear corridor, threw a grenade to block Reeve's men. Go, Daniel, he shouted. 2 soldiers fell, but Harris took a chest shot, collapsing by the doorframe. He looked at Daniel one last time, blood at his lips. Finish it, he whispered, then lay still. Grace shouted, done. The download hit 100%. Daniel grabbed her hand, yanking out the USB. The system blared, 3 minutes to detonation. Reeve stood, eyes wild with hate and panic. You can't escape. Daniel grabbed a fallen M4, shooting a ceiling pipe. Boiling steam poured down, obscuring vision. He pulled Grace and Rex through an emergency corridor. Behind, Reeve roared. Lock the central door. Don't let them out. But the power shorted, disabling the locks. Daniel glanced back. Harris's body lay motionless, bathed in flashing red light. He gripped the USB, whispering, Your death won't be for nothing. They raced through the corridor, warning lights pulsing. The alarm screamed. Containment breach confirmed. Detonation imminent. At the corridor's end, the door to level -4 stood open, cold wind howling through. Daniel, Grace, and Rex charged out, merging with the pulsing red emergency lights, clinging to the slim hope of escaping before Chimera erased itself. The bunker shook violently as the alarm hit its peak. Emergency lights flashed frantically, corridor ceilings shedding paint and dust. Daniel pulled Grace back through the level -4 bio area, small explosions echoing from the control center. As they passed the main corridor, a deafening crack sounded from the specimen storage to their right. Cold air rushed out, mixed with chemical fumes and spilling water. It can't be, Grace gasped, stopping. Daniel looked back. One of the massive nutrient tanks they'd seen was splitting, thick green fluid pouring out, bubbling on the metal floor. A low guttural roar came from within, not mechanical, but heavy, wet, rhythmic breathing. A gray, muscular hand, taut as steel, slammed the glass. The crack widened, then the entire pane shattered. Fluid gushed like a waterfall. A creature over 2 meters tall emerged, human in form, but with a head blending canine and human, long fangs, and charred, wrinkled skin. A small metal tag hung from its neck, K9 Het 47. Grace stumbled back, trembling. Daniel aimed his gun, firing. The bullet hit its chest, but the creature only staggered, then roared, a guttural mix of human and beast. Simultaneously, cracking sounds came from other tanks. God, not just one, Daniel muttered. Go, he pulled Grace, Rex following, fur bristling. In the distance, Reeves' team entered the corridor. Spotting Daniel, one shouted, targets ahead, but before they could fire, the first broken tank's creature charged, moving with terrifying speed. It seized the nearest soldier, slamming him to the floor. Bones cracked audibly. Another soldier fired, bullets piercing the creature, but each shot only enraged it further. Screams and gunfire filled the corridor. Reeve appeared at a junction, face dust-covered, pistol in hand. Shoot its head, he yelled, but too late. A second creature burst from a side room, tackling his team, scattering them. Muzzle flashes lit the smoky haze. Daniel pulled Grace into a side corridor, red light washing over them. We've got to reach the upper level now. Rex growled low, leading them through a shaking iron staircase. Behind, gunfire, roars, and screeching metal blended into chaos. Part of the ceiling collapsed, debris blocking the path. Daniel glanced back. Reeve was retreating, blood streaming from his thigh, where glass had pierced it. He fired twice at an approaching creature, then fell. Grace hesitated, turning to Daniel. We can't leave him. Daniel gritted his teeth, gripping her hand. He'd kill us if he could stand. But looking back, he saw Reeve crawling toward a control panel with an emergency override light. He was going to trigger an early detonation to bury them all. Daniel cursed, firing at the panel. Sparks flew, and the system died, the display going blank. Reeve looked up, eyes fading but fierce. You don't understand. They won't stop, he rasped. Daniel replied coldly. I won't let anyone else die for your father's legacy. Another roar echoed nearby. From the haze, a smaller creature crawled out, eyes glowing yellow. Rex charged, attacking head-on. The massive creature swiped, throwing Rex against the wall, but he staggered up, growling fiercely. Daniel fired 3 shots into the creature's head. It stumbled, screeched, and collapsed. Rex wobbled, panting, blood dripping from his shoulder. Grace rushed to him, whispering, Good boy, Rex, good boy. Roars echoed through the level. More creatures were breaking free, dragging deformed bodies through the corridors, eyes glowing red in the haze. Daniel pulled Grace and Rex toward the emergency stairs. As he opened the door, cold air rushed up, carrying distant helicopter rotors. Reeves' forces were retreating to the surface, abandoning the facility. Go, Daniel shouted. They climbed the steel stairs, the floor shaking. Below, Reeves sat against the wall, clutching his wound. He looked up, half in pain, half in despair. A creature loomed behind him, its shadow swallowing the light. Daniel glanced back as it raised its claws. Reeve turned, his final look at Daniel mixing acceptance and atonement, before blood splattered the steel wall. Daniel roared, yanking Grace up the last step. They burst through the door, cold air hitting their faces. Ceiling lights flickered chaotically, signaling system collapse. From below, growls and breaking metal merged into a final cry from creatures never meant to see daylight. Outside, the corridor shook violently. Daniel scooped up Rex, running with Grace toward the auxiliary tunnel. The final door opened, wind howling through, whipping their hair. Behind, the bunker emitted a blinding white flash, then a massive explosion threw them to the ground. Heat surged, smoke and debris swirling. Daniel held Rex tightly, his back scorched by the blast. As the smoke cleared, only blackened metal fragments and the smell of burning lingered across the pine forest. In the distance, they heard helicopters fading. The last survivors abandoning the man-made hell that had collapsed. Grace turned, face smudged, eyes teary. Is it over? Daniel stared at the black smoke rising from the bunker's mouth, voice low and hoarse. "Not yet. We have the data, and the world needs to know. But for now," he stroked Rex's head, the dog panting but wagging his tail. "We survive first." Below, the fire continued to burn, reflecting off twisted steel plates, etched with project Chima, level 4, before fading into the inferno. The explosions from the lower levels rippled upward, each deep boom like a giant drum echoing through the earth. Daniel felt the floor tremble beneath his feet, metal dust cascading from the ceiling. Emergency lights flickered relentlessly, shifting from red to white before going dark, leaving only the glow of flames surging through ventilation ducts. The sharp smell of ozone and chemicals choked his breath. "Go!" He grabbed Grace's hand, pulling her forward, while Rex limped behind, blood matting his front leg but refusing to slow. A second, louder explosion tore through the space, tilting the corridor to one side. A ceiling panel collapsed across their path, sparks bursting like fireworks. Daniel yanked Grace down, both slamming into a steel wall, heat seared through his collar, burning his skin. "The main power grid's chain reacting," Grace shouted, her voice breaking amid the screech of colliding metal. "If the bioreactor below triggers, this whole place will blow." They veered into a northern side corridor, narrow, pitch black, smoke and burning plastic tainting every breath. Cracked walls exposed smoldering pipes, glowing blue liquid dripping like mercury onto the floor. Daniel supported Rex, urging the dog forward. "Come on, old boy," he rasped. The animal licked blood from its leg, then surged ahead, as if it understood. Behind them, a massive explosion roared. Level -5, where the control room once stood, had fully collapsed. The shockwave shook the corridor walls, concrete blocks crashing down. Daniel glanced back, just as a towering blue flame erupted from the bunker's mouth, piercing the dust cloud and shooting upward, illuminating the pine forest above. "Chemical hydrogen reaction," Grace stammered. "The biopreservatives in the tanks are burning." They reached the northern auxiliary bunker, the space opening up. A metal escape hatch appeared, sealed with rivets from the outside. Daniel pried with his knife, hands slick with sweat and ash. He hissed, "This damn door," then slammed his gun's butt against the bolt. After 3 hits, the rivet popped, and the door swung open. Cold outside air rushed in, mixing with the bunker's heat, creating a swirling, acrid draft. They scrambled out, tumbling down a leaf-covered slope. As their feet hit the ground, the earth shook violently, toppling all 3. A long, low explosion roared like thunder. The blue flame shot through the hatch behind them, soaring dozens of meters, lighting up the Pine Barrens. Nightbirds scattered, shrieking in panic. The shockwave uprooted leaves, swaying pine trees. Daniel hunched over Grace, shielding her head, while Rex pressed close to him. For a moment, the New Jersey night sky blazed like midday. The blue flame twisted, spiraling into a vortex before fading, leaving thick black smoke. Heat warped the air like a mirage. The bunker's final sound was a long, deep growl, then silence. Project Chimera had buried itself. Daniel looked up toward the distance. In the fire's lingering glow, he saw the main bunker entrance, now a massive crater. Earth and rock collapsed into a funnel-shaped pit. Twisted steel, shattered glass, and concrete lay tangled in white smoke. Amid the rubble, he glimpsed a figure, Colonel Reeve, kneeling at the crater's edge, blood soaking half his body. Reeve stared toward them, eyes vacant. Daniel took a step forward, but Reeve raised a hand to stop him, lips moving inaudibly. In the wind, Daniel caught one word: end. A moment later, the ground beneath Reeve cracked, blue fire surging up, engulfing him. His form vanished in the blazing light, swallowed completely. A final shockwave erupted, throwing Daniel and Grace down the slope. They rolled through rotting leaves, crashing into a tree, then lay still, chests heaving, breaths mingling with smoke and scorched pine resin. From afar, the wind carried a long, whining creak, like metal bending, the last echo of the Chimera bunker before its total collapse. When Daniel opened his eyes, the Pine Barrens had fallen into eerie silence. Night wind swept through charred treetops, scattering ash across the ground. He looked around. Grace lay beside him, gasping but alive. Rex rested between them, his front leg lightly burned, fur singed, but alert. Daniel stroked his head, voice hoarse. "Good job, boy." In the distance, the fire's red glow lit the sky like a guilty beacon. Nothing remained but smoke and ash. The entire facility was gone, along with its creatures. Grace sat up, trembling at the sight. "Is it over?" she asked, voice rough from smoke. Daniel paused, then answered, "For them maybe, for the world out there, not yet." He pulled the USB from his pocket, its silver casing scratched but intact. Grace looked at it, eyes flickering with hope and fear. "This will change everything," she said. Daniel nodded slightly. "Or make it all happen again." The wind shifted, carrying ash and a metallic tang. In the sky, faint blue glimmers faded into the night. The Pine Barrens, once serene and wild, was now a smoldering graveyard, the massive tomb of a monstrous project that sought to transcend human limits. Daniel gripped Grace's hand, watching Rex struggle to stand. "Let's go," he said, voice low but firm. Before they come back, they supported each other, moving away from the site, their three shadows shrinking in the lingering white smoke behind them. Project Chimera vanished from the map, leaving only a burning scar at the heart of the Pine Barrens. The night wind swept through the smoky pines, carrying the scent of metal and cold ash. Daniel helped Grace and Rex along a narrow dirt path north, their feet heavy in the mud. After hours, when the fire from the Chimera crater was just a distant glow, they stopped at a dilapidated wooden cabin, its walls moss-covered, door ajar. Daniel recognized it. Harris Cole's shack. Inside were traces of him, a wooden table, broken chair, oil lamp, and a faint whiff of gunpowder. He pushed the door open, led Grace and Rex inside, and bolted it shut. The room was cold, but quiet. Daniel lit a fire, blue smoke rising, cutting the damp. Grace sat on the floor, opening her backpack, pulling out the silver USB, the only thing they'd carried from hell. She stared at it, like a living thing. "If this doesn't get out, everything we did is for nothing," she whispered. Daniel nodded, eyes heavy. "Harris died for it. We'll finish the rest." He found an old satellite transmitter in a corner, its swivel antenna intact, Harris's tool for monitoring military signals. Daniel set it on the table, connected a backup battery, and tuned the frequency. The indicator light blinked faintly. "Still works," he said. Grace opened her laptop, plugged in the USB, and the interface displayed hundreds of files. Project Chimera Phase Report Specimen Data, Financial Sponsors Helix Frontier Continuation. She began compressing them, hands trembling slightly. In the silence, only the clack of keys mixed with wind whistling through door cracks. Rex lay by the fireplace, his front leg bandaged, occasionally lifting his head as if sensing something. Daniel glanced at his watch. Nearly 2 a.m. "If they survived," he said, "their sweep team will be here before dawn." Grace didn't look up. "Then we send the signal before they jam it." She typed the final command, creating Project Chimera.zip, over 12 gigabytes. Daniel connected a cable from the laptop to the transmitter, opening a civilian satellite band. "I'll send it through a non-government relay. If we're lucky, it'll hit independent servers overseas." The screen showed the upload progress, inching slowly. Grace whispered. Harris said only the public could break their control. Daniel watched the flickering fire, voice low. He was right. The government will deny it, but once this spreads, they can't cover it forever. Outside, rain began to patter. Drops hit the tin roof like a ticking clock. Daniel went to the window, peering through the dark. In the forest, a distant white light flashed, then vanished. Helicopters. He lowered his voice. "They're scanning." Grace looked up, biting her lip. "How long do we have?" Daniel checked the progress. 64%. 10 minutes if the signal holds. She nodded, eyes glued to the screen. Data streamed, uploading to Node 7, Node 8, Node 9. Suddenly the screen flickered, flashing. Signal interference detected. Daniel gritted his teeth. They're jamming. He adjusted the frequency, switching to a backup channel. Keep it connected. Don't shut down. A distant boom shook the window frame. Daniel peeked through the curtain. A green flare fell nearby, its light piercing the fog. They've got our heat signature. He doused the fireplace, plunging the cabin into darkness. Only the laptop's faint blue glow illuminated Grace's face. Progress, 82%. 83%. Rex growled low, standing, ears pricked. Daniel signaled silence. Helicopter rotors grew louder, searchlights sweeping the treetops. A beam grazed the cabin, lingering for seconds before moving on. Grace whispered, "They'll come back." Daniel replied softly, "We just need a few more minutes." He unlatched his gun, checking the magazine. Outside, the engine noise dropped lower. The helicopter was landing troops. The progress bar hit 94%. Grace looked at him, eyes tense. "If they find us, take Rex and go." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not leaving you. We get out together, or stay together." A closer explosion shook the ground. White light flooded the forest, accompanied by a megaphone. "Surround the north. Don't let the targets escape." Daniel glanced at the screen. 97%, 98%, 99%. Then upload complete, transmission successful. Grace gasped, eyes tearing. "We did it." Daniel yanked the cable, slammed the laptop shut, and stuffed the USB into his inner pocket. "Now we go." He splashed gasoline on the fireplace embers, igniting the cabin to erase their traces. As flames roared, they bolted through the back door, sliding down a pine needle-covered path. Wind carried the helicopter's roar, searchlights sweeping behind. They ran without stopping. Rex, limping, led the way, weaving through bushes and roots. Daniel glanced back. The cabin fire glowed in his eyes, then faded into darkness. "We need to get out of their jamming range," he said, breath ragged. "Once the data's mirrored, the world will see the truth." In the distance, thunder rumbled, and heavy rain fell. Under the night storm, three figures melted into the deep forest: the man, the woman, and the dog, the last witnesses of Project Chimera, fleeing the Pine Barrens before dawn, carrying a truth no one could silence. The forest rain lasted 3 hours, drenching the Pine Barrens as if nature itself wanted to erase the disaster's traces. By dawn, thick fog blanketed the scorched trees, and the chemical smoke lingered. Daniel, Grace, and Rex hid in a rocky hollow on a northern slope, once an abandoned quarry. The fire from Harris's cabin had long died, leaving only smoldering ash and wood. Daniel lay flat, blood seeping from a shoulder wound where metal had sliced him, his jacket soaked. Grace bandaged him with torn cloth, fingers shaking from cold. Rex lay nearby, front leg wrapped, breathing heavily. In the distance, military helicopters droned steadily, like a giant beast's heartbeat scanning the forest. "They'll find us soon," Grace said, voice hoarse. Daniel nodded, eyes on the cloudy sky. "I know, but the data's sent. One successful relay, and they can't stop it." A piercing loudspeaker cut through the fog. "This is Special Forces. Anyone in the Pine Barrens, drop your weapons and surrender immediately for protection. The forest is under lockdown." The voice echoed, blending with the wind. Daniel closed his eyes, breathing deeply, then whispered, "Protection, that means no witnesses." Grace gave a faint, weary smile. "They've lost control. Now they just want to clean up." Another engine sound emerged, distinct from the military's, lighter, steadier. Daniel activated Harris's locator, its antenna faintly operational. The screen blinked. "Incoming signal, civilian frequency." He looked at Grace, eyes alight. A civilian signal. A private plane heading northwest. Grace frowned. "Reporters?" Daniel nodded. "Maybe your contacts. They tracked the data transmission." He flashed an infrared signal, shielding it to avoid military radar. After 3 pulses, the screen responded. "Copy signal. Press location beacon." Daniel hit the beacon button. "If they catch this, we've got a chance." 5 minutes later, a small helicopter's hum grew closer, its rotor frequency distinct from military craft, lighter, faster. A pink glow pierced the fog, then vanished. "They see us," Grace whispered, eyes straining. But from the south, heavy military rotors answered, searchlights slashing the forest. "Damn, both sides are here," Daniel hissed. He grabbed his gun, helping Grace up. Rex growled, baring teeth. Two helicopters emerged through low clouds, one black, unmarked, the other bearing the Independent World Media logo. The military fired first. Two flares shot up, bursting brightly, white light flooding the forest. From above, gunfire raked the slope, shredding trees. Daniel pulled Grace into the rocky hollow, dirt exploding around them. "Keep your head down," he shouted. A bullet struck the rock beside them, sparking. The civilian helicopter descended, releasing white smoke to obscure vision, and broadcasted international press. "Cease fire. This area is being recorded." The voice echoed, forcing the military to pause. In that moment, Daniel lit a yellow smoke flare, distress signal. A press pilot spotted it, tilting the chopper and dropping a cable. "Go," Daniel yelled. He hooked Grace to the first cable, securing the clasp. "No, you first," she protested. "I'll cover." He pushed her toward the cable. Grace gripped it, rising slowly through the fog. Rex barked, standing between Daniel and the enemy. Another burst of gunfire screamed past, hitting a nearby tree. Daniel fired 2 shots to draw attention, then hooked Rex to a cable. "Up, buddy!" The dog leapt, claws gripping, and was pulled up. As Daniel hooked himself, a blast exploded nearby, knocking him down. His ears rang, dust coating his face. He struggled up, hands shaking on the cable. The press chopper banked hard to dodge fire, the cable swinging. Suddenly, a massive explosion roared below, a military helicopter hit by stray fire, erupting midair. The shockwave blew back wind, spreading white smoke. Amid the chaos, the civilian pilot pulled up full throttle. Daniel clung to the cable, muscles numb, but was finally hauled into the cabin. Grace hugged him as he was pulled in, gasping, "Are you okay?" Daniel shook his head, sweat and blood streaking his forehead. Rex lay between them, panting. Below, special forces fired futilely. Red tracer lights faded in the fog. The civilian helicopter cleared the area, heading toward the sea. Through the window, Daniel looked down. The Pine Barrens below was a blackened, cratered ruin, white smoke rising like ghostly ribbons. The pilot's voice crackled in their headsets. "We received your data, Grace. The world's watching. You're safe now." Daniel squeezed Grace's hand, eyes distant. "No," he said slowly. "We only escaped the forest. We still have to escape the ones who made it. But for now, as the helicopter cleared the jamming zone and the first dawn light broke, they had survived, and Project Chimera's secret had finally left the Pine Barrens." The press helicopter flew through the night, past the Pine Barrens, over highways and sparse suburbs, before landing at a small airfield in Atlantic City. There, a rescue team quickly moved Daniel, Grace and Rex to a temporary safe zone. All 3 were exhausted, clothes soaked, eyes red from smoke and sleeplessness. Grace clutched her laptop, holding the Project Chimera.zip backup, the data they'd bled for. As dawn broke, sunlight piercing gray clouds, Grace sent signals to independent media outlets, including Independent World Media, Reuters Digital, and the humanitarian hacker group Civic Leaks. Within 2 hours, hundreds of gigabytes of classified data spread across networks, downloaded to thousands of devices nationwide. The first broadcast aired at 8:03 a.m. With a red ticker scrolling, "Military Data Leak, Project Chimera, Secret Human and Animal Genetic Experiments." Daniel's bunker footage played unedited, dusty metal corridors, signs reading Project Chimera, Level 4, green nutrient tanks, and lifeless human-canine hybrids. Accompanying it was an audio clip, "Integration Successful, Subject K907, Stable Behavioral Instability. 87%, Undeniable Proof." That morning, the White House held an emergency press conference. The spokesperson, face taut, declared, "The circulating videos and documents are fabricated, designed to undermine military credibility. No verifiable evidence supports a project called Chimera." But hours later, the denial was countered. Veterans of K9 units across the U.S. spoke out. On social media, thousands of posts surged with hashtags #K9 Project Truth and #Justice for Rex. Many claimed they'd received specially trained dogs, unaware of their genetic modifications. A live IWM interview aired footage of Daniel and Rex in Afghanistan, 2010. Daniel saving a unit from an ambush, thanks to Rex's uncanny bomb sensing ability. When asked, "Do you think Rex was different from other dogs?" Daniel replied simply, "I think he understood humans better than anyone on that battlefield." The quote went viral, becoming a symbol of absolute loyalty and the tragedy of the revealed truth. Within 2 days, major outlets launched investigations. The Washington Ledger ran a headline, "Cold War's Forgotten Experiments, Is Chimera Real?" The New York Chronicle, where Grace once freelanced, published authenticated, DoD-stamped original files. Senate Veterans Committee members demanded a special congressional hearing on the K9 program. Public outrage swept military bases. Former K9 handlers sent letters demanding transparency. But for Daniel, amid the world's uproar, there was only emptiness. Rex lay on a thin blanket in the airfield hangar, breathing heavily. The shoulder wound, gashed by a creature's claw, had infected. No medicine, bandages, or care could help. Grace sat beside him, eyes red. "We could take him to a vet," she said, knowing it was futile. Daniel shook his head, voice choked. "No, he's gone far enough." He sat by Rex for hours, hand on his head. The dog occasionally opened its eyes, licking Daniel's hand, brown eyes reflecting faint light. Daniel whispered, "You did good, old friend. Because of you, they'll know the truth." Rex whined softly, breathing shallowly. Then his head slumped, his breaths fading. Daniel sat motionless, a part of his soul torn away. That afternoon, as the rain stopped, he carried Rex to the edge of the Pine Barrens, where unburned pines remained. Grace followed, holding the steel collar etched with K907. They dug a small grave under a pine, the earth wet and smoky. Daniel laid Rex down, covering him with a blanket. He cleaned the collar, wiping off dust, and buried it with him. "He was the last witness," Grace said softly. Daniel stared at the grave, voice low. "No, he was the first victim." He shoveled dirt, leveling the ground. The wind sighed through the forest. He planted a small wooden marker, carved with Rex, K907, his soldier, a friend, a legend. As they left, the sunset cast gold over the pines. Grace looked back, whispering, "He deserves to be remembered as a hero." Daniel didn't reply, only squeezed her hand. That evening, in a safe house outside Philadelphia, a special broadcast aired. The Department of Defense acknowledges the existence of Chimera, a biological genetics program, from 1968 to 1974. A federal investigative committee will be formed. Grace turned to Daniel, eyes shining. "We did it." But he stared into the void, voice low. "No, Grace, we've only begun." Outside the window, the night wind rose, carrying the scent of scorched pine from the distant Pine Barrens. Under the moonlight, the sky was strangely clear, as if Rex's spirit still ran among the trees, guarding the truth he helped reveal. A week after the Chimera data spread across America, the nation plunged into media chaos. News channels ran non-stop. Each hour brought new evidence, documents, recordings, or images from Harris Cole's cache. But the real shock came when an unseen video surfaced online, uploaded from an anonymous source. Its sole title, Confession of Colonel Nathan Reeve. The video opens with a grainy image. Reeve sits before the camera, face gaunt, uniform dust-covered, shoulder bandaged, clearly filmed. Shortly before the Chimera bunker's explosion, a dim desk lamp casts faint light, his voice hoarse but resolute. "My name is Nathan Reeve. Colonel, Special Forces. I was tasked with sealing and cleaning my father's legacy. Dr. Isaac Reeve, founder of Project Chimera. If you're watching this, I've failed. My father didn't create a weapons program. He created a curse on humanity. Reeve breathes heavily, eyes locked on the lens. Chimera wasn't terminated in 1974, as they claimed. After my father's death, the program was restructured under different names: Helix Frontier, Neural Gene Warfare Division, Biofusion Command. The government didn't just know. They kept funding it. They used genetic hybridization to create beings to replace soldiers. But when risks emerged, they buried it and privatized the facilities. I was sent to Pine Barrens to erase evidence. But what I saw in that bunker, it's no longer human. He pauses, voice catching. I can't justify my actions anymore. I only hope people know the truth. If anyone hears this, finish what I couldn't. The video ends there, unedited, raw. It's shared over 10 million times in the first 24 hours. By noon the next day, Congress holds an emergency session. A special investigative committee, the Federal Inquiry on Genetic Weaponization, is formed. Its chair, Senator Eleanor Carter, declares to the media, "We cannot let future generations grow up in a nation where scientific progress is built on blood and deceit. Project Chimera was real, and we will prove it." Grace Miller is called as the primary witness. She presents the data files, images, and recordings Daniel retrieved from the bunker. The hearing is broadcast live nationwide. When photos of the nutrient tanks and hybrid creatures flash on the chamber's large screen, the room falls into heavy silence. An elderly senator whispers, "This is science's sin." After the hearing, Grace returns to the New York Chronicle's newsroom. Over the next 2 weeks, she publishes a series titled The Devil Beneath Pine Barrens. Each part delves into a hidden facet of the project. The covert recruitment of scientists, funding from defense conglomerates, and dozens of covered-up disappearances over 2 decades. The series garners 120 million views in 5 days, becoming the biggest investigative journalism event since Watergate. In the 4th article, Grace writes about the canine dogs that served in Afghanistan, the 4-legged soldiers with genetically altered DNA. She writes, "They called them tools of war, but those creatures only knew loyalty. We owe them an apology and the truth." Daniel reads the article in a small house on the outskirts of Pennsylvania, where he and Grace are staying. When he reaches the final line, dedicated to K907, Rex, the last soldier of Project Chimera, he goes still. He folds the paper, looking out the window. A light rain falls, the scent of wet pine filling the air. But the public storm rages on. Federal investigators, under public pressure, expand their search. From Alaska to Nevada, they uncover at least 4 old research facilities with structures like Pine Barrens. Some are dismantled, but most retain traces of power systems and Helix Frontier markings. In Texas, a sealed warehouse holds dozens of metal containers labeled biological storage. Inside are tissue samples and equipment bearing faded Chimera logos. The FIG-ED-W committee releases a preliminary report. Project Chimera was real. It involved genetic experiments on humans and animals from 1968 to 1982. Dozens of federal and private facilities were involved. Much evidence was destroyed, but data recovered from Pine Barrens confirms the program's scope and continuation. Hundreds of protests erupt in Washington, Chicago, Los Angeles. Banners reading "Stop the Chimera Legacy" flood the streets. Human rights groups demand criminal prosecution of surviving funders. Public opinion splits, some see it as a crime, others as a necessary experiment during the Cold War. Amid the chaos, Grace keeps writing. She barely sleeps, fueled by coffee and screen light. Daniel helps verify data and witnesses. Many nights, he wakes to find her at the desk, typing. "If we stop, they'll rewrite history," she says, voice tired but firm. Finally, on the day of the official report, Project Chimera's existence is confirmed and partially declassified. The government admits responsibility, but claims all directly involved individuals are deceased. The public doesn't buy it. Independent investigators vow to pursue remaining secrets, especially original gene samples and surviving data systems. That evening, Grace sits at the desk, sending the final draft of her series to her editor. The last headline reads, "The truth cannot be buried." Pine Barrens was only the beginning. She looks up at Daniel, sitting quietly on the porch, fingers tracing Rex's old steel collar. In the dim light, both know the investigation isn't over, and Project Chimera, though burned to ash, lives on in memory, in the DNA of creatures humanity created. Autumn wind sweeps through the Pennsylvania fields, carrying the scent of hay and smoldering straw. Daniel stands silently before the small rented wooden house, its sloped roof and weathered walls 10 miles from town. Since the federal investigation exploded, he's avoided cameras and interviews. The press hounds him as a war hero, but Daniel feels nothing heroic. He just wants peace, something he hasn't had since entering Pine Barrens. One early October morning, a congressional sealed envelope arrives. Inside is an official summons. The Figibble Committee respectfully requests former Sergeant Daniel Graves to testify regarding events related to Project Chimera and the K9 program. He reads it repeatedly, then folds it, setting it beside a cold coffee mug. The next day, a federal agent visits. Standing outside the fence, his voice is soft but carries weight. "Mr. Graves, Congress wants the story from the source. You survived. You can help millions understand the truth." Daniel replies quietly, "I've said enough. The truth doesn't need more words. It's out there." He turns, closing the door. On television, Grace appears frequently, becoming the face of the genetic transparency movement. Her series, The Devil Beneath Pine Barrens, wins a National Journalism Award, and the New York Chronicle publishes a book of the same name, translated into 16 languages. But fame doesn't erase Grace's haunting memories. She calls Daniel often, but he rarely answers. One afternoon, as sunlight slants through the trees, a knock sounds. Daniel opens the door to find Grace, long coat, hair tied up, holding a magazine wrapped in brown paper. She smiles, light as a breeze. "I know you don't want visitors, but I thought you should see this." She hands him the magazine. The cover shows Rex, a photo from the Afghanistan base, eyes raised against a sandy sky. The bold headline, "Rex, the last soldier of Chimera." Below, smaller text, the story of the dog who exposed the greatest secret in U.S. military history. Daniel stares for a long time, his gaze softening. "Where'd you get this shot?" Grace's voice catches, "From Army archives. I got permission to use it. You know, hundreds of people wrote in, saying they had dogs like Rex. And the government just issued a new order, shutting down all current K9 programs, starting genetic origin investigations for every unit." He nods slightly, setting the magazine on the table, fingers brushing the cover as if afraid to tear it. At least, he's finally called what he was, a soldier. Grace smiles sadly. "You too, Daniel. You saved not just me but the truth." They sit in silence, listening to the wind through the window. Grace looks at the golden-lit yard, asking softly, "What now?" Daniel replies slowly, "I've lost too much to wars, human and scientific. Now I just want to go somewhere no one knows my name. Maybe the mountains, start a small farm. Raise a few dogs, live the rest of my life in quiet." Grace lowers her head, saying nothing. As she stands to leave, she pulls a small photo from her pocket, a still from bunker footage of Daniel and Rex in the Pine Barrens. She hands it to him. "I think you should keep this." He takes it, eyes suddenly misty. "Thanks, Grace. And if you go back to Pine Barrens, light a candle for Rex for me." She nods, eyes reflecting understanding. "I will, and I'll keep writing, so no one can forget." "Don't write for me," Daniel says softly. "Write for the creatures who never got to choose their fate." That afternoon, Grace leaves. Her car fades past the pines, leaving Daniel on the porch. He looks west, where the sun sets behind the mountains. Crickets begin to hum, blending with the wind like a farewell song. Days later, official news breaks. The U.S. government permanently suspends all military canine programs, establishing a recovery and care fund for former service dogs. Part of it is named the Rex Foundation for Ethical Science. Hearing this, Daniel only smiles, eyes skyward. By month's end, he packs his belongings. A backpack, a few photos, and Rex's old steel collar are all he takes. He leaves a single letter for Grace, short and simple. Thanks for keeping your promise. Live to tell the story, I'll live to forget. The day he leaves, fog blankets the dirt road out of town. His old pickup rolls slowly, tires crunching dry leaves. On the passenger seat, the K907 collar glints silver in the morning light. Daniel drives without a destination, knowing only that, where the wind and pine scent linger, he'll stop. Behind him, the Pine Barrens fade, a blackened land now sprouting its first green. The forests heal, while those scarred seek to forget. But in the twilight, Daniel swears he hears Rex's low bark echoing in the wind, a call from a loyal friend, reminding him the truth was saved, and loyalty endures. The story of Daniel Graves' Rex and Project Chimera isn't just a tale of survival in the Pine Barrens shadows, it's a mirror for modern America, where technology, power, and scientific ethics stand in tension. Chimera's genetic experiments, with their ambition to enhance humanity for national interest, echo 21st century fears, uncontrolled AI, CRISPR gene editing, or governments and tech giants holding millions biological data. Beneath progress's veneer, the story warns that when science crosses humane boundaries, the cost isn't just monstrous creatures, but the loss of humanity itself. Daniel, a veteran scarred by war, represents post-conflict America, weary, haunted, yet clinging to faith that truth and loyalty can redeem. Rex's death, the K9 dog bearing Chimera's blood, is a tragic image of exploited loyalty, but also a symbol of a quality society must not forget. Responsibility for what we create. The Pine Barrens lesson isn't just for scientists or politicians. It reminds every American today that transparency, ethics, and the courage to speak truth are the foundation for a nation to heal. In an era where data and biology are new power tools, we need Daniel Graves figures to face the darkness and Rex figures loyal to what's right, to ensure progress doesn't become tragedy. Thank you for joining the story. A veteran and his dog found an abandoned military truck in the Pine Barrens, a journey of loyalty, truth, and the cost of unchecked science. Please subscribe to the channel for more stories from America's hidden lands, where every shadow holds an untold truth.